Guys, we have Mike McGill with us on the pod today. He is CIO at medical service company. I reached out to him to talk mostly about mindset and stoicism, which is arguably my favorite philosophy. It has brought me so much, especially nowadays because I keep on taking more risk as time advances. Right? Some of you might know me with my crazy goals, like becoming a trillionaires or helping a trillion people, whatever that means, because we're 7 billion this planet Earth. And yeah, Stoicism helps me quite a lot. And we're going to discuss what it is, how it helps me, concretely, how it helps Mike. Mike, welcome to the pods. Bienvenue, bienvenido. Can you tell us a bit more about yourself, about your role at medical service company, and tell us a bit more about Stoicism along the way?
Yeah, Charles, thanks for having me on. Like you said, Mike McGill is CIO at a healthcare organization here in Cleveland, Ohio. So CIO, Chief Information Officer. I've been in tech for 23 years now. And, maybe some of the things we'll touch on is kind of put me in a position to kind of continue to advance and gain some leadership in IT. So I lead a great team of IT professionals. One of the things that has benefited me the most in my career and in just my life in general, as you touched on, is Stoicism. So I've been practicing Stoicism. I discovered Stoicism just about, I would say, 10 years ago now. And, kind of in my mindset journey through life and the things I've read, and I've always been very inquisitive, always trying to learn new things and read different books. I would say Stoicism is probably the most important discovery I've made on my kind of personal development journey. Just every single day, Stoicism is something that helps me to be a good CIO, a good parent, a good spouse to my wife. It's been incredibly beneficial for me.
Love it. Cool intro. And I would like to rescind on my words. It's not only beneficial for folks that like to take a lot of risk. Obviously, there's much more beneficial, but life is hard. Let's face it. Everyone has problems. They surface all the time. Now, you might not be aware of that if you're on Instagram or TikTok all the time because life is all happy, jolly in there. It's obviously the total falsehood. Most of human life is pain and suffering. So, but good news, if you adopt the right mental models, you
Mhm.
can go through this life with a lot of fun. There's not been a day in the past 7 years that I haven't considered myself in the green, aka being more happy than in pain, even in Ironmans, like even in ultra events, swimming for 5 hours 20. I had to constantly remind my brain that, yeah, this will end too. And also to enjoy the flow of being alone in the total silence in the water. That being said, Mike, yeah, like I discovered Stoicism as well around the same time with the same author, Ryan Holiday, amazing guy, amazing author. It has been, yeah, literally life changing because you mentioned, for example, with your spouse, with your kids. I would say with my employees as well, as a leader's the keyword here, whoever you lead. And I do
Mhm.
recommend for folks to lead stuff in life because if you're being led, you don't have control. And Stoicism is very much about control, right? What you can control, you act on it. What you can't, you don't. So often people will freak out around you. They will tell you, oh my God, what's happening? And meet in those situations, just like, okay, here's the plan, tack, 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 tack. We're going to execute on that. And if not, we're just going to shut up about everything and we're going to save our energy. This is quite a drastic way to save it, but give us a couple of case studies, Mike, of where Stoicism has really saved you some energy and has created peace in your life.
Yeah, Charles, I think you mentioned something really important earlier, just about, kind of I think what Stoicism will teach you is that kind of powerful lesson that the events of your life are outside of your control in a lot of cases. Life unfolds, and it's our perception of those events that really kind of color in our lives and dictate how happy we'll be. My life could unfold the way it unfolds today, and I could be miserable or I could be happy. I could see the challenges, I could see the opportunities for improvement in there. When I think back on specific examples of my life, I think back on the pandemic is a great time. For me being in IT, we had hundreds of employees that worked in the office. We had to get them home. We had to come up with a strategic plan, and we had a couple choices. We could have been emotional about it. We could have been emotionally reactive. We could have panicked about this situation, or we could have said, let's look at the facts. Let's look at what's in our control and what's outside of our control. What's outside of our control is the fact there's global pandemic going on. However emotional I get about that, it's not going to matter because I can't control that. What I can control is the plan that I put together to help our employees safely get home and be able to do their jobs and care for our patients that we have at the company I work for while they're working from home. That's one example. I mean, I could probably go through a few today or over the weekend where some situation comes up and I have a choice to either get emotionally reactive or I get a choice. Right. One thing I think Stoicism does, it helps build a space between stimulus and response. Emotionally reactive people, something happens, they get mad. Something else happens, they get sad. Something else happens, they get scared. What Stoicism does, it kind of stretches a little bit of a gap where the stimulus happens and you can drop some objectivity in there. And you can look at what's the healthy response to this circumstance. And then you kind of choose your response a little bit more instead of just being kind of dragged around by your emotions. Like so many people go through life just emotionally responsive. Whatever happens, they respond with the first emotion that comes into their head and they think that's the right one and they just run with it. Versus, again, Stoicism will help you build some objectivity. So again, a specific example was kind of how I had to respond and lead my team through the pandemic. But gosh, that's a big one. There's 20 things that come up during the day where me choosing to be a little objective about this situation and choose a better response is going to be better than the Mike McGill I used to be, where it would be like, oh, this happens, I'm pissed. And then I'm just going to run with being pissed because I feel like I'm justified in being pissed, instead of just saying, hey, what's really going on here? Do I have all the data that I need? And let me choose something that's going to be a little bit of a healthier response.
Right. I think it's easier for us, man, to say that generally speaking, we have less of these emotions. And me, I was kind of born into a world in which I had a mom that was quite stressed and emotional. And I really had to 10x on the IQ part, and I have stayed somewhat cold in that regard. I have done some emotional work, whether we're talking about psychedelics and so forth, and it has worked in releasing emotions. I guess if we talk about Stoicism, it's not necessarily not feeling those emotions or not repressing them, at least in the common way of saying things. It's is dealing with what you have, the cards that you're dealt. If someone dies in your family, obviously you're gonna feel sadness. So it's not about like coming up with a super strict plan, because I think in that case it will repress some of these. And I think it's important to mention that it's in life, it's stacking multiple mindset. Obviously, Stoicism is in my life also one of the strongest mental stack that there is. It's probably, I don't know, 15% if each mental blocks that I had is 1% in average. So yeah, stack with these other situations, but it's certainly a fantastic mental model to deal with short-term problems, to extinguish fire as a manager when most humans will default on emotions. What I like about it as well is that there's a quote, I forgot who said it, but it's very much true. In stress management, there's two ways to fix a problem, right? One is mindset, to just calm yourself down, and so forth, which I do recommend doing. And the other one is actions, is like the actions you'll put forward, and that's Stoicism right there. So what's cool about Stoicism is that it will fix most of your problems and you will save energy. Now, I still have a question. For people that are not naturally inclined or genetically inclined or with their life story, so me, I check all of these boxes. I'm a man. I have learned to deal with people's emotion, to manage them since my very young age. How do you shift from emotions and reactivity to Stoicism in a TikTok world, in a drama-filled world in which people are addicted to those emotions? How do you make the shift?
Yeah, Charles. I think a couple of things there. One, I kind of always kind of said that Stoicism is there for people who need stoicism. If you're naturally stoic and you just naturally don't get emotionally responsive to things, it may not resonate with you. I think stoicism resonated with me so much because I was someone who tended to get emotionally responsive to things. So how do you get better at it? I think it's the same way you become a better podcaster, the same way you become a better writer, the same way you become a better runner. You intentionally practice. So I talk a lot about the practice of stoicism, and people are like, well, how do you practice stoicism? Well, you know, I I have stoicism nearby me at all times. Like I read stoicism every day. I journal at the end of the day through a kind of a stoic lens of what did I do well today? Where was I not as stoic as I would have liked to have been? And what can I do better? So that's a nightly practice. So to me, I kind of call it the SPR method: study, practice, reflect. So studying through reading, practicing through kind of intentionally kind of knowing what are those circumstances in my life where I need to bring stoicism into it, and then reflecting upon that in the evening. And that whole process, I mean, the time commitment, you could read the Daily Stoic in the morning for 3 minutes. My journal technique that I use in the evening literally takes less than 10 minutes. And then just kind of, kind of identifying those circumstances during the day. So kind of a long answer, but really it's just like everything else. How do you get better at anything? You practice it, and you continuously practice, and you do it every day. And just again, like with running, if you do it every day, you're going to incrementally get better at it. And you're going to continue to get better at the longer you practice it and the longer you do it with intention. So it's the same with stoicism. I practice stoicism.
I would say also lead people. If you're not in any leadership position, you probably won't understand that. Leading implies trying to be the best version of yourself and managing emotions. So yeah, that's always a good tip right there. And closing the serotonin loop, right? Like understanding the benefits of stoicism. So next time there's a fire, are you how much is that pain on 10? Is it a 9.5 that you feel when you're being emotional and you create a wreck in your life? If it's that high, then yeah, maybe try something else and then observe the effects of that new philosophy, of that new action on your life. And once you understand that, then I guess it will be quite the habit. You'll adopt the habit quite quickly. Now, when you do adopt these stoic the stoic philosophy and you get to manage people, a lot of people will tell you like, oh, you're so poker faced, you're so cold, like what's wrong with you? Being stoic doesn't mean lack of EQ. It means to manage your own internal engines, which are emotions. It's these flows of energy, and
Right.
then you can empathize with other. I understand that you feel that way, but the best solution, the quickest path to fix both of our problems is that way. What do you do when you have people in your team, Mike, that you manage and they can't get out of emotionality? You suggest to them the quickest path, the coldest path to get there, to fix both of your problems, but they're still emotional. What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the one thing, and you touched on a couple of things there, Charles. One is like, look, we are human beings, and emotions are, stoicism isn't about being robotic. I think that's one of kind of the biggest misperceptions about stoicism, like being stone faced. I'm not going to show any emotion at all. I think really stoicism is more of an emotional management system than emotional controls, like trying to control. It's like managing, smoothing out the edges a little bit. And also I think about stoicism a little bit like the bouncer at the club, like if a negative emotion comes to visit me, I'm like, I'm not pulling back the velvet rope. I'm going to question, like, okay, let's really put to this test. But like, look, man, I'm a husband, I got kids. Like, if joy or happiness comes to visit, I'm not gonna get like overly over analytical about it. Like, I'm gonna pull back the velvet rope and let those emotions in. So again, it's managing your emotions a little bit, kind of testing the validity. Now, to your point of what do I do, like if I'm leading someone and they're being overly emotional. So I'm probably not going to come and say, hey, let's talk about stoicism here, but I might ask them like, let's kind of get down to what's the root cause here. Like, let's get it on paper. Let's kind of get it out there. Like, what's going on here? and what can we do about it? And then kind of weed out. Because a lot of times when people are getting overly emotional, there does seem to be this tendency that they're kind of a lot of that wasted energy about things I can't control about the circumstance anyhow, especially right in the heat of the moment. Um, maybe it's not the time to think why. Let's figure out how we can fix it. And then when things diffuse a little bit, then we can go back and look at what caused it to happen and how can we prevent that from happening again in the future. So I think in the moment of emotional kind of, and even with my kids, it's like people get emotional. It's like, okay, let's try and strip some of this out and just say, what are the facts? Like, what's going on here? What are the facts? What can we control? What can't we control in the moment? And that kind of helps diffuse some of that kind of emotional overreactiveness that might be going on.
Yeah, in the moment, I think some people, they want to be listened. They don't want anything rational, so you take the time, unfortunately, which is sometimes hard with us energy savers and OCD optimizers. So you need to take the time and then listen, and not necessarily go for the rational part, but more like the heart opening part. And yeah, some people will just not be cooperative ever, or like very progress really slowly in the rationality vs emotion state of things. And yeah, that might kind of disbalance you. Even myself, obviously I'm not perfect. Sometimes my brain just forgets about this whole stoicism. I don't have the energy, or literally the mental energy. So I guess a tip also for people, when it's normal that you don't have it perfect at the start, and try to manage your energy. If you're at the end of the day, it's not the time to have a conversation with your wife at 9 p.m. in the bed. It's just like time to sleep. And the convo, you can schedule it for the next day when both of you are energized and productive, and then you can be your stoic self, because yeah, else it will be a total wreck. Maybe Mike can relate to that. But do you have any other tips, Mike, for people that are starting on the path of this philosophy, to be as successful as they can?
Yeah. And just real quick on what you said there. Yeah, I mean, the Stoics have the concept of the Stoic sage, which was like the perfect Stoic, but they knew it was aspirational. Trust me, I have my moments too, Charles, where I'm like, damn it, I could have done better there. It gets back to that journaling practice to kind of catch yourself and know that it happened, and then you can keep working on getting better all the time. But I think for me, what I would recommend to people, I'll go down the book route here for your listeners who like to read. So I think the best introduction to Stoicism that I think for somebody completely new who wants to learn the philosophy a little bit better is a book called A Guide to the Good Life by William Irvine. That is your kind of Stoicism 101 book. It's going to teach you the philosophy, who the Stoics were, and it'll give you some real practical tips for how to practice Stoicism in your life. But if you're a complete newbie and you kind of want to start somewhere, again, that kind of looking at the situations in your life through the lens of what I can control and what I can't control. That's called the dichotomy of control in Stoicism. Just understanding what I can control and what I can't control, and just learn to gain a little more acceptance for the things that you can't control. And that takes practice, and then focusing your attention and your efforts on the things that you can control in any circumstance. I think that's kind of a good Stoicism 101 kind of first mindset of Stoicism to try and start working on. But there's all kinds of other great things in Stoicism kind of as you continue going down the path. But a good place to start from a reading standpoint is A Guide to the Good Life by William Irvine. And a good place to start from a practice Stoicism is just start looking at life through the lens. Whenever you're feeling emotionally upset about something, what can I control and what can't I control in this situation?
And that's the beauty of the philosophy. It's so simple. How did you use stoicism to write your own book, Mike? Because book writing is not easy, and you must have your up and down. So tell us about that use case for stoicism.
Yeah, I think a little bit again about the benefit of Stoicism is some degree of stripping the emotion away from something. A good concept that I read somewhere was kind of being a doer instead of a feeler. The people who are successful in life do it because it needs to be done, and they don't let their feelings, like, oh, I don't feel like doing it today, right? I'm never going to become a great runner if I only run when I feel like it, right? I'm never going to feel. Maybe you'll go through those periods of time like, all right, I'm really inspired, I'm going to go out and run, but you are inevitably going to hit a dip where you're like, I don't feel like doing it. And again, it's kind of emotion. If you let your feelings guide you, it's good, usually going to take you down a place where it's going to be harder to be successful what you want to do. So I think the same goes with writing. You got to go through those dips where it's like, I don't feel like writing. And I think, again, stoicism, and I got to be a doer. I'm going to do it whether I feel like doing it or not, because I'm a doer. And I think that stoicism helps with that, because it does let you kind of, maybe gives you some objectivity in your emotions. Why don't I feel like doing it right now? Is there a good reason or is it just this, like, my brain wants to make an excuse? And maybe you can see through that in yourself a little bit and say, I don't have a good reason not to do it, I'm going to go ahead and do it. But again, it's the same with writing a book, it's the same with lifting, it's the same with running, it's the same with anything, that with meditating, with reading, it's the same with anything in life. If you only do it when you feel like doing it, you're not going to do it consistently. So again, stoicism maybe helps you kind of see through your own BS a little bit that your brain's trying to feed out to you, and just say, look, I don't have a good reason not to, I'm going to go ahead and do it anyhow. And just push through that little, sometimes that big brick wall, when you push against it, it's like made out of paper mache. You just like push right through it. And you're like, oh, that wasn't really a much of an obstacle there. You just got to get through that first wave of inertia.
Love it. Yeah, the mind's a weapon and you can use it for your own goods, but most humans by default use it for their own bads. Um, whether we talk about panic attacks or depression, it's kind of a negative feedback loop of constantly being into your mind and thinking and thinking and thinking and not moving and not acting. And you know, us humans, we're very cerebral creature, but yeah, move yourself, get momentum, because if you don't, you're gonna get stuck and your mind is gonna overtake. Your mind is meant to be negative to survive the saber-tooth tiger. Obviously, the many parts of the brain don't realize that we live in this new world, this society that we created. Very impressive, very beneficial, this society as well, if you know how to navigate through it. Most people don't. So thank you so much, Mike, for the value of that you added today through Stoicism. I'll just finish with that. Stoicism can save your life, you know, when you're in life-threatening situations, whether it's like, I don't know, a human being aggressive with you in the streets and so forth. It will force you to take good decisions, you know, and not react primally and be in fight mode, you know. Sometimes it's just better to think and do what's better for your optimized outcome, right? Not fighting directly the threat, or if someone hurt himself, you don't panic, you stay chill, and you make good decisions, just like an emergency room doctor. So Mike, where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, I think the best place it's on Twitter. That's kind of usually my hub of online activity. I got other stuff going on, but Twitter, I'm at McGill MD 921. That's usually where my latest thing, usually where I'm hanging out online. Excuse me.